Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Marie Murphy. I'm a non-judgmental infidelity coach. And in this video, I'm going to start to talk about choosing between your spouse and your affair partner, which is a position a lot of people find themselves in. And it's a pretty big topic with lots of different facets we need to discuss. In today's video, I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why it can be overly hard or unnecessarily difficult to make a decision about, do I want to stay in my marriage or do I want to pursue a relationship with my affair partner and leave my marriage in order to do so. I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why our thinking can get so clogged up when we even begin to approach this decision. And thus, when we have a better understanding of the problem, it's easier to deal with the problem and ultimately find a solution to the problem. For the sake of being clear about my reference point, I'm going to spell out the example I'm going to work from as I talk about choosing between your spouse and your affair partner. In my hypothetical situation, you are married and you care about your spouse and you value your relationship with them in many ways, but you also haven't been enthusiastic about your spouse as a romantic partner or a sexual partner or a sensual partner, erotic partner, all that for a really long time. And you've chosen to stay with them in part because they're a really good person and things between the two of you aren't terrible. And maybe because you just haven't gotten around to making decisions about what you actually want to do with your romantic life. But you've also known for a really long time that you want something different out of your love life / sex life / romantic life. And then lo and behold, you met someone new and great. And before you knew it, you were having an affair. And that affair has evolved into something that you think is pretty darn amazing. You really love and value and appreciate your relationship with your affair partner. And you know your affair partner feels the same way. And the two of you have been talking about making some changes in your lives so that you can have a non-affair relationship and share your life together. Now, the first thing that you absolutely have to do if you want to make that happen, if you want to have a non-affair relationship with your current affair partner, is you have to decide whether you want to make this happen or not. You have to decide if you want to leave your marriage or not. And then, of course, if you decide to leave your marriage, you actually have to leave your marriage and do all of the things that are associated with that. But we're not concerned about any of that stuff today. Today, we're concerned with the decision, do you want to leave your marriage or not? If you do, you will have the opportunity to pursue a non-affair relationship with the person who is currently your affair partner. And if you don't leave your marriage, let's assume that that precludes that possibility, right? There might be ways of making it work, but we're not talking about that today. Now, my opinion is that deciding to leave a marriage can be a pretty significant decision, regardless of whether you've been engaging in infidelity and regardless of whether you have an affair partner that might be a factor in your decision-making. So I certainly think it's important to carefully and deliberately consider whether you want to leave your marriage or not. I think that that's a decision worth taking seriously. But here's where the trouble starts. What I see over and over again is that people don't treat the question of whether or not they want to leave their marriage as an important question worthy of serious consideration. They treat it as a question that has only one correct answer, or they treat the decision as one that has impossibly high stakes. In other words, they make the question of whether or not they want to leave their marriage or the decision of whether or not to leave their marriage as one of monumental significance, larger than life significance. And when we start believing that the stakes of a decision we're considering making are monumentally high, we may very well freak out and get totally paralyzed And when we're totally paralyzed, it's pretty hard to actually make a decision. Why do we think the stakes of deciding whether or not we want to stay married are so high? Well, I would like to point to a number of reasons that are really important to be aware of. For starters, as a society, we tend to glorify the shit out of committed relationships, especially marriages. And in general, we tend to think that if you have gotten married, it is fundamentally better to stay married than to get divorced. Sure, we make more exceptions for this than we used to. Collectively, we share the idea that divorce can not only be okay, but it can be a good outcome sometimes to a greater extent than we used to. But I would argue that our collective bias towards the benefits or virtues of staying married rather than getting divorced is still pretty strong. We generally think that unless your marriage is objectively terrible, it's fundamentally better to stay married than to get divorced. And we also tend to think of divorce as a really bad thing that is by definition difficult or even harmful for everyone involved in the divorce or impacted by the divorce, right? And as you may well know, these kinds of ideas are very prevalent. Sometimes they're made explicit, sometimes they're more implicit. But explicitly and implicitly, they're circulating within the cultural fog, so to speak. They're piped into the air we're all breathing. And so a lot of us have absorbed these kinds of ideas or these ways of thinking as truths or facts, right? And to be clear, it is not a fact that it is inherently better to stay married if we have gotten married. But when we're exposed to that kind of thinking or flavors of that idea, variations of that idea over and over and over again, it can start to seem like it is actually a fact, that it is fundamentally better to stay married than to get divorced. Now, on top of all that, on a more personal level, we may care about our spouse a lot, even if we do not feel much desire for them romantically or sexually, and even if we really want to have a romantic or sexual relationship with the person that we're partnered with, we may still really love and care about our spouse really deeply. We may also appreciate and enjoy many aspects of the life we share with them. We may not want to hurt them, or better yet, we may be terrified of hurting them. We may not even want to do anything that could mildly inconvenience them. So the idea of telling our spouse that we want a divorce may seem incredibly scary, but it also may seem like an act of unnecessary cruelty. Plus, we may also be very, very comfortable with the familiarity we have with our spouse and the life we share with them. And comfort and familiarity can be very seductive indeed. So we've got to be able to consider all of this stuff that's going on within the context of making a decision about whether or not we want to leave our marriage systematically and deliberately if we're having a hard time deciding whether or not we want to leave our marriage. And the problem is we aren't offered too many opportunities to weigh these different considerations out in a systematic and deliberate way. But great news, the coaching I offer does give you the opportunity to do exactly that, to weigh these kinds of considerations out. And it's really important to be able to do that when we're making a decision we consider important. Here's a side note that's important too. I want to be clear that deciding whether or not you want to leave your marriage does not have to be a terribly difficult decision. Even if you consider it an important decision, that doesn't mean it has to be a torturous one. It really is possible to make big life decisions without a whole lot of angst. But a lot of my clients do find the decision of whether or not to leave their marriage to be a pretty torturous decision. So that's why I'm speaking to the possibility that it could be a very difficult choice for you to make. But if you're not finding the choice difficult to make, there's nothing wrong with you, okay? That's the end of my side note. Back to what I was saying. If we're having a hard time making a decision about staying married, we need to examine the beliefs we may have absorbed just by being alive and living in the world that we live in about the value of staying married versus not staying married. We've got to examine our mental operating systems. We may have picked up some beliefs that aren't really serving us, and that's okay. That's what we do as humans, but we don't want to accept every belief that we've picked up as a non-negotiable truth. We may need to challenge a lot of conventional wisdom. We may need to reject a lot of shared assumptions about the value of marriage, that whether or not it's okay to stay married or get divorced or all the things, right? And we may also have to reckon with our very personal reasons for possibly wanting to stay married and decide if these constitute good enough reasons for us to actually stay married. And in a way, these are pretty simple things to do, but our mind tends to make these relatively simple things a whole lot more complicated than they need to be for all kinds of reasons. And this is why working with me can be so very helpful. I can help you get out of your own mental labyrinth and make decisions about your marriage systematically and deliberately and deal with all of the emotion that goes along with this decision, right? Okay, now there's a whole other layer to this. This video isn't just about deciding whether or not you want to leave your marriage. It's about deciding whether or not you want to leave your marriage primarily, or at least in great part, for the sake of pursuing a non-affair relationship with your affair partner. There's an idea circulating out there that you should never leave your marriage for your affair partner, or primarily for the sake of pursuing a relationship with your affair partner. There's an idea out there that you should never leave your marriage for anyone else. You should only leave your marriage for you because you want to leave your marriage. I think this advice is really well-intentioned, but I think it also creates a lot of trouble for some people. First, I'll tell you why I think this advice is well-intentioned, and then I'll tell you why I also think it's kind of problematic. Sometimes people are unhappy in their marriage, and they have done very little, if anything, to try to address their unhappiness in their marriage. And then they meet someone new and amazing, and they start having an affair, and they're like, oh my God, this new person I've met is perfect. I'm going to leave my spouse. I'm going to go have a relationship with my affair partner, and everything is going to be so perfect. And then guess what happens? They leave their spouse, and lo and behold, their relationship with their former affair partner, who's now just their partner, turns out to not be perfect. Because how could it have been? No relationship is perfect. So given that that does happen, the advice that you shouldn't leave your marriage just for the sake of wanting to be with your affair partner can be applicable in some cases. It can be really useful in some cases, right? In the sort of scenario I just described, leaving your spouse for your affair partner probably isn't going to create a set of outcomes that you're happy with. However, some people who have thoroughly considered whether or not they want to leave their marriage hear the advice that you should never leave your marriage for your affair partner, and they take it to mean that since they are having an affair, it can't possibly be legitimate for them to decide to leave their marriage. Do you see the problem here? People hear this piece of advice, like you should never leave your marriage for someone else, and they take it to mean that it is not valid for them to want to leave their marriage if they have an affair partner in the picture. And I've seen people fall into very deep pits of confusion and self-doubt from thinking this way. And that just doesn't help anybody. So take that advice, oh, you should never leave your marriage for your affair partner, with a few grains of salt. Furthermore, in relation to that piece of advice, if you're married and you're having an affair, it's pretty difficult to completely disaggregate your thinking about your marriage from your thinking about your affair partner. If you're having an affair, it's impossible to like unthink that or unknow that or make that untrue. Now, sometimes I hear that some therapists give this advice and I don't agree with it. Like sometimes people say like, well, maybe I should pause my affair while I make a decision about my marriage. And you could, but it's not necessarily going to be helpful. And here's why. If you're going to be thinking about your affair partner no matter what, even if you aren't seeing them or engaging with them in any way, then the exercise is kind of like moot, right? Like it doesn't matter if you're not seeing them, if you're still thinking about them 24/7. So the way that I operate is to help people intentionally disaggregate their thinking about their marriage and their relationship with their affair partner to the extent that that is actually possible. And I believe that it is possible to make the decision to leave your marriage, even if you have an affair partner, and even if you can't completely make that decision in a vacuum, right? Even if it's impossible to 100% disaggregate your thinking about your spouse and your affair partner, I still believe that it is possible to make a decision about your relationships that you feel very good about and are confident in acting upon, right? It's all about thinking systematically and deliberately, And I can help you do that, and you may well need help doing that. Just to really drive this point home, the whole notion that you can't possibly decide to leave your marriage if you have an affair partner is not based on any kind of absolute truths or laws of the universe or anything like that. But people often present these ideas as if they are absolute truths, and some of us interpret these messages as if they are absolute truths. And when we do that, it often makes it harder to make decisions. There are other common ideas about affairs that can also make it really hard to decide what you want to do if you're considering leaving your spouse and you have an affair partner. For instance, collectively, there's a lot of bias against relationships that start as affairs, right? We think that affairs are like tainted, like relationships that start as affairs are tainted because they started off in the context of two people doing something bad and wrong. And therefore, the relationship will never work out because it started in a bad way. Bullshit. There's also all kinds of research, quote unquote, that proclaims that, I think the number of people always tell me is like 2%. 2% of relationships that begin as affairs last for any length of time. Now, there's a lot I can say about these studies and all of the numbers they produce, and all of the things that I have to say are critical. But for now, that's not really the point. The point I'm making is that people read this stuff or absorb these messages, and they take these messages as fact, and they start to assume that their affair relationship can't possibly work out or won't possibly work out. And this further convolutes their thinking about the question of, do I want to leave my marriage so I can have a chance at pursuing a relationship with my affair partner? And all of this can start to seem like a reason why you shouldn't leave your marriage. Because even if you think that your relationship with your affair partner is amazing and has the potential to become even more amazing in the future, if like everybody says that it's better to stay married than get divorced, and all of these studies say that only 2% of affair relationships last beyond whatever stage, I don't know what the studies say, it starts to seem like, oh my God, like maybe I'm being delusional by having any faith that my affair relationship could actually work out going forward. And then people start to question what they want and question their own assessments of their relationships, and generally start to create a whole lot of doubt and confusion for themselves. Blah, no fun at all. We have to deal with this doubt and confusion and the sources of this doubt and confusion in a systematic and deliberate way. For instance, we can acknowledge that, yeah, some affair relationships don't work out beyond a certain point, but we can also acknowledge that plenty of relationships that don't begin as affairs don't work out either. We can recognize that there's a fair amount of antipathy towards infidelity in our society, and that informs a lot of the conventional wisdom about the viability of affair relationships. And from there, we can start to say, okay, maybe all of the things that I've heard about the viability of affair relationships isn't as true as I've thought it was. Maybe this is just a bunch of other people's opinions, not a set of non-negotiable facts, right? Then we can also start to look at the specifics of what you know you want in regards to your relationships and your life as a whole, without all of the gobbledygook thinking that's out there in the cultural fog that I've been describing, clogging up your thoughts. Here's one last thing I'll say about why people sometimes get so very confused about choosing between staying married and leaving their marriage so that they can pursue a relationship for their affair partner. Many of us have learned that new relationship energy is a thing, or we've learned about limerence, or maybe we're aware of the good old-fashioned honeymoon period. And we worry, well, first of all, we believe all of these concepts are far less empirically non-negotiable than some people present them to be. Like, people experience new relationship energy in different ways. It's not this thing that only lasts for a certain period of time and then totally fades no matter what. But some people have like absorbed the idea that that's how it works. That's not the case. Anyway, a lot of us have gotten the idea that like the honeymoon period or limerence or a new relationship energy is this limited thing, and we're in it with our affair partner. And so therefore, what we're experiencing with our affair partner is just new relationship energy, or just limerence, or just the good feelings that come with a new relationship. And so we start to minimize what we're experiencing with our affair partner because we've heard of these like concepts, we've heard of these phases of relationships, and we think like, oh, that's that thing, I'm in that, and that only lasts for a little while, and after that my relationship is just gonna like fizzle out into nothing. Obviously, we need to question that, people. It is certainly worth doing a little intoxication check, right? It can be extremely exciting and intoxicating to get involved with somebody new who we think is great. And of course, having an affair can like multiply or compound the excitement and intoxication we're feeling when we meet someone new and great. So there is that, and it's worth doing a little like check-in with ourselves. Like, hey, is what I'm experiencing just like the high of this experience? Is this just affair related excitement? Like, am I just like really into this because this is novel? Or is there more to it than that? Would I want to give this a shot beyond this new and exciting phase, right? It's worth kicking the tires on what you're experiencing. But the thing is, like, some people have been in their affair for long enough to know, as well as anyone possibly can, that what they're experiencing with their affair partner is not just new relationship energy. And yet they use the concept of new relationship energy to question the legitimacy of what they're experiencing. And this can really mess a lot of people up because they may know as well as anyone can that they really want to pursue a non-affair relationship with their affair partner, but then they start to like question themselves because there's all these people who say like, oh, you know, like what you're experiencing is just limerence, it's not going to last. Boo. So the point of all of this, the point that I've been trying to make in today's video is that there are a lot of very powerful and very prevalent ideas out there that may get in the way of you making a decision about whether or not you want to leave your marriage, and more specifically, whether or not you want to leave your marriage in great part for the purpose of being able to pursue a non-affair relationship with your affair partner, that may really clog up your thinking. So we need to be able to deal with all of these ideas that are out there in a way that actually serves us. We need to be able to identify the beliefs we've absorbed. We need to question whether or not they are helping us. And we need to be willing to start to believe new and more helpful things if we don't like the beliefs that we've absorbed, right? And doing this is totally possible. Examining and adjusting our thinking is a thing we can totally do, but it does take effort. It does take willingness to practice new skills, but that's not a bad thing. And the results are totally worth it. And of course, I can help you do this. One of the weirdest things, I think, anyway, about being human is that we are totally capable of believing things that aren't true and aren't helpful. We get so attached to ideas just because they're out there, just because we've been thinking them for all of our lives so far, just because our brains are really comfortable thinking them, even if these beliefs are actively destroying our lives or creating a lot of trouble for us. The importance of examining what we think and potentially adjusting what we think is that our beliefs are the foundation for our actions. When we believe something is true, we tend to act as if it is so. And that can be a really helpful thing or a really unhelpful thing. And that's why it is so very important for us to be willing to examine and manage our thinking, right? And that's what we do together in coaching. So if you're ready to get to work, if you are ready to manage your mind and deal with your infidelity situation in a way that you feel great about, let's get started now. You can enroll in my online course. You're not the only one within like a minute. It will probably take you like a minute to sign up and then another minute to get your confirmation email that will give you access to all of the teachings and resources that are housed within the course, which will help you make decisions about your infidelity situation that you find difficult to make, but end up feeling great about making, right? And of course, if you want to work with me one-on-one, the way to do that is to schedule an introductory coaching session with me. No matter how you choose to work with me, I am going to help you become the master of your own destiny and deal with your infidelity situation in a way that's truly right for you. Aren't you ready? Let's get to work. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.